It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Hello. Heidi, ho, Haiti, he. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? And how are you? Our show today is in two parts. The first half, I'm going to play music. We put an ad on music-xray.com and have received many submissions for music to be played on the show. The submissions kind of piled up, and so I said, okay, we've got to get those out. So I went through them. I picked the top 5, and we're going to play those all at once. Well, not all 5 at the same time, one at a time, for a total of 5 songs. And then on the second half of the show, we have an interview with an author named Gabriella Kovac, who has an amazing story that she has written regarding her mother and father, who lived during the Nazi occupation of Hungary and then subsequently the communist invasion of Hungary. And then they got out and moved to Australia. So it's a very interesting story. That will be coming up in the second half of the show. Before we get to the music, I thought I would give you an update on my perpetual diet. The diet hasn't been doing so good. Or rather, I haven't been doing so good on the diet. But I do have an excuse. I'm blaming the air conditioning. We were having trouble with the air conditioning for a while, and the house had been very hot. So I really hadn't felt like cooking. And as much as I love to cook, it was just too hot in the house. Now we have finally got the air conditioning fixed. And because I didn't cook anything for, a month or so, I got this sudden urge and I started baking cookies, which is one of my favorite things to cook. So I baked a few batches of cookies, and of course you bake them, you got to eat them. I mean, you can't just bake them and not eat them. That's impossible. So I haven't lost any weight, needless to say. But as soon as I run out of baking ingredients, I won't buy any more, and then I'll go back on the diet, and hopefully I'll start losing weight. I haven't put on any weight, so that's good. And I did lose 10 pounds from when I started. Cookies are not exactly great diet food, so it didn't aid to my weight loss at all. But I do blame the air conditioning. I suppose I should just shut the air conditioning off, and then the house would be really hot and I wouldn't feel like baking. That could be a consideration. I'd like to thank everyone who submitted through music-xray. We got lots of songs, and I'm sorry I can't play everybody, but thank you very much for submitting. So the ones that we did pick, we're going to play for you now. The first one is called Outspoken by Clubtastic Records. The second one is called Americon by Movie Music Group. The third one is called Interdimensional by Fusion Force. Fourth one, Without You by Gladys 911. And the last one is called I Feel Alive by Inanna. So here are the songs.
Outspoken, that's me. Outspoken, that's me. Outspoken, that's me. Outspoken, that's me. Oh yeah, I say what I want, even if I know it might get me into trouble. I don't like to hold my emotions in, I speak out, maybe too much. But what's the point in being shy? I've got a voice, so I'll use it. I know I have a bit of an abusive nature. I know sometimes I should think more before I start mouthing off. But I'm not one to keep quiet. I am an emotional person. If I want to speak out, then I will do. No, I don't need much coaxing to stop me being outspoken. I can get wound up really quick, and I can let off steam. 'Cause I am very opinionated, which I very often get slated for. Opinionated! Outspoken, that's me. outspoken, that's me. Oh yeah, I say what I feel, even if I know it won't do me any favors. I like to give off my point of view and put across my opinion. I'm not one to stand in a corner, I always say what I'm thinking. I know I can be sometimes overbearing. I know when I get going, I start cursing and swearing. 'Cause I am very highly strung with very strong views. I'm not one to keep my mouth shut. Oh no, no, oh no. No, I don't need much coaxing to stop me being outspoken. I can get wound up really quick and I can let off steam. 'Cause I am very opinionated, which I very often get slated for. No, I don't need much coaxing to stop me being outspoken. I can get wound up really quick and I can let off steam. 'Cause I am very opinionated, which I very often get slated for. Outspoken, that's me. Outspoken, that's me. I say what I want, I say what I like, even if it might get me in a fight. Outspoken, that's me. Outspoken, that's me. No, I don't need much coaxing to stop me being outspoken. I can get wound up really quick and I can let off steam. Oh yeah, 'cause I am very opinionated, which I very often get slated for. No, I don't need much coaxing to stop me being outspoken. I can get wound up really quick and I can let off steam. 'Cause I am very opinionated, which I very often get slated for. Outspoken, opinionated, I can let off steam. Not once keep my mouth shut. Oh no, oh no. What the fuck, yeah?
And a big limp-faced daddy skateboard lesbian. She was uptight, and the first time I saw her, she was a bank teller with a voice of should and coulds and weather-beaten fantasies. Her fate was twisted and ungoverned. Miracles would spill from lime tongues in the erections of the finest hours. But to me, she was always a dormant pig, a wildcat galaxy and a lollipop spy. I could live as much as I could endure and endure as much as I could love. But now I realize I'm just a beam under the radar. Under the radar. Under the radar. Under the radar.
Landlocked in New Mexico, paradise is a simple soul. Burishampa to the south, white-skinned universe from a black man's mouth. Condors, illegal, top secret and hidden slums. Humans in PepsiCo, LED Miss Judy coalesced where to go. Death of light, light is dressed. Peace prize for atomic test. Glassed in skyways, cocktail heart. Satellite sails, nights in rubber. America on me, dance on honey. It's a carnival street, dance on night. You're a superstar, freedom is now, it's time to start. America on me. America on me. Trees thick with checks, what you see is what you get. Cold blue veil, I'm a replica. Attuned to the face of Razika. Water for psychopaths, D-Mod, TV laughs, uptown celebrity. Gunpowder love, give back to me. Night fresco, Zydeco, Lotus Blossom, midnight call. Sexy girl, Black Panama. Why sing more? You're a superstar. Frontiers land untouchable. Freedom so sensational. Reality, cherry pie. Loaded minds, narcotic high. America on me. Dance on honey. It's a carnival street. Dance on night. You're a superstar. Freedom is now. It's time to start. America on me.
in a cheap motel. People whisper from the great beyond, fragmented American. Give me the sign, cause I'm moving, honey, honey, baby, moving all the time, moving all the time. Orchids of love, Saudi Goldfinger, whiskey and rye for Mr. Kissinger. Definition is premonition, too still for the superstition, too calm for the sexy girl, too fast for this quiet world. I'm coming down hard like a baby King Kong, red house, dirty confession song, naked flesh, drenched in sweat, dancing like there's no regret.
America, America me, dance on high. It's a carnival street, dance all night. You're a superstar, freedom is now, it's time to start. America me, America me, America, dance on high, dance all night. America me, America, dance on high, dance all night. America me.
into your eyes. sun that makes me rise. You're the moon that fills my nights. Baby, you make my life complete. Oh, and there's not a soul that can compete. And baby, you're everything that my heart needs. Baby, you fulfill my dreams. 'Cause I found in you just one life, truly me. Oh honey, without you I'll be lost in tears. Only having you near eases my fear. You know how I feel is true. Hey, and I'll do anything for you. You see, I spent all night thinking this through. Let me in your heart again. Oh, I know that we can work this out, yeah. 'Cause you're the one I can't live without. No, 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 no. Baby, you fulfill my dreams. 'Cause I found in you just one life, truly me. Oh honey, without you I'll be lost in tears. Only having you near eases my fear. I miss you more and more each day, and I wish that you were here today. Oh, please come back to me and wipe these tears away. Heal this pain I have inside. Whoa, I don't wanna lose you, no, 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 no. I never wanna leave your side, no. Whenever you need someone to talk to, I promise I'll be right here for you. Oh, to comfort and guide you through, yeah. Baby, you fulfill my dreams. 'Cause I found in you just one life, truly me. Oh honey, without you I'll be lost in tears. Only having you near eases my fear. I said having you near eases my fear. Having you near eases my fear. Oh, baby, 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 I here would be nothing without you.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hey there, this is Douglas Coleman, host of the Douglas Coleman Radio Show. I wanted to let you know that we are now offering advertising slots on our show for just $5. Yes, you heard it right, just $5. That's cheaper than a McDonald's meal, and it's better for you too. I will mention your website and product on our show, or for just $10, I will play your pre-recorded ad up to 30 seconds in length. We are now an internationally syndicated show with listeners from all over the world. This is a great and inexpensive opportunity to gain some exposure for you and your product or brand, and your ad won't just play once. It will become a permanent part of the show, which will archive on YouTube, Mixcloud, and on Spreaker. So why not do it now to get the exposure you deserve?
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's EWPSproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Go listen, download, and subscribe to The Douglas Coleman Show. It's available at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. Also on iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube. The Douglas Coleman Show is an internationally syndicated talk and music show that features fascinating and sometimes famous guests from all aspects of the entertainment industry. The topics can range from light and fluffy to sober and serious. Our focus is on music artists, but we also feature producers, authors, directors, and even promoters. The Douglas Coleman Show. Sometimes chat, sometimes music, always entertaining. Again, it's available today at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. You can also connect with them on Facebook at Douglas Coleman Show 1, follow on Twitter at Douglas Coleman 3, and you can even find them on TuneIn Radio. Again, that's the Douglas Coleman Show at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS, iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, and more. Go listen, download, subscribe, and share with your social networks today.
And now...
Hey, Rocky!
Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
One day, an attractive young woman, Georgina, a repairer of Persian carpets, set out on a bicycle ride in the Hungarian countryside. She hit a rock that bent the front wheel. At a small cycle shop in a nearby village, she met a handsome mechanic named Imre. They fell in love and married in a Jewish ceremony. It was 1943. While the fires of war burnt throughout Europe, Hungary remained at peace. A few months later, Hitler invaded, and the SS began mass roundups and deportations of Hungarian Jews to death camps. In Budapest, where Georgina and Imre were now living, a reign of terror resulted in torture, rape and executions. Imre joined a small band of Jewish motor and cycle mechanics who had a bold idea to escape the slaughter that awaited them. They would attach themselves to the advancing German army as a motorcycle repair unit. They disguised themselves as German soldiers, procured military-style motorcycles, and rode off to the war front to service the Nazis' motorbikes. The safest place, they decided, was close to the enemy. Soon after Imre left with the repair unit, Georgina realized she was pregnant. She obtained false papers and dyed her hair blonde, passing as an Aryan. Her mother disapproved and proudly wore the yellow Star of David. Her decision led to her being ordered to the depot in a city where she would be sent to a concentration camp. Georgina's brother Andor, disguised in a German uniform, went to the depot and walked inside. He withdrew a revolver and, speaking perfect German, harshly ordered his mother outside. Both escaped. Hiding in a small flat, Georgina and Andor passed as husband and wife. Georgina had completely lost touch with Imre. For months, brother and sister and their mother miraculously avoided capture by German search parties. Georgina gave birth as the Russians bombed Budapest. She went out into the snow to find food to save her starving newborn. Death and destruction was all about. Having given up hope of seeing Imre alive again, the survival of his child meant everything to her. Avoiding the rampaging Russian army, she stumbled into a large underground bunker filled with food. A miraculous moment later, Imre stepped out from behind the containers. He told her of the repair unit and how, despite a few close encounters with the enemy, their audacious deception held firm. When the German army had retreated, the unit disbanded and scattered. But even now, Imre had to remain on the run to avoid the Russians. Loading Georgina up with food, they kissed goodbye. They did not know if they would ever see each other again. Imre disappeared amongst the debris of the shattered city, and Georgina made her way back to her hiding place to feed their child. They would only meet again when the war was finally over.
She was born in Hungary just after the Second World War had drawn to a close. She lived through the Hungarian uprising against the Communists in 1956 and remembers vividly Russian tanks under her bedroom window. Through the genius of her mother, Georgina, her family managed to leave the Communist bloc and come to Australia in 1957. She's an experienced public speaker, fashion designer, and cook. Throughout her life, she has been inspired by her mother's amazing tenacity on outsmarting the Nazis and the Communists and winning. Her mother's zest for life motivated her to write Georgina Holocaust stories. Okay, please welcome Gabriella Kovac. Hello, Gabriella. How are you?
Hello, Douglas. I'm very, very well. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for coming on. I want to work a little bit backwards here because I know your story. You've written a book and it sounds very fascinating, and I want to talk about that. But let me work backwards time-wise. I want to start with your life now, and then we can go back to when you were a child and your mother in the story. So you live in Sydney, Australia. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And what are you doing now? What do you do in your life now?
Well, I've just finished my second book, or my third book, I think, but I've just finished it, and we're just going to have it on Amazon, I think, early next week.
Okay. And what is this book about?
Well, it's very similar to the first book, but it's about a guy who's from a different part of the world and how he gets to freedom. And it's called Fierce Courage because it was the trials and tribulations that he had to do to get to a free world.
I see. Okay. So is this similar to your story and your mother's story?
No, because this person wasn't Jewish, but he had different problems. Like he was from Croatia, and again, during the Second World War, he wasn't allowed to be educated, and then he had to cross the border, which was 300 kilometers away in the snow.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, your accent is very interesting. You were originally born in Hungary, and you went to Australia in 1957. I assume you speak Hungarian?
Yes, actually, I speak fluently.
So did you speak Hungarian in your family even after you moved to Australia?
Yes, we did. But also because we came to Australia legally with a passport, and what we wanted to bring out, we bought out, and I bought a lot of my parents bought a lot of Hungarian books and a lot of poetry. So although now I don't have any Hungarian friends, I still read and write Hungarian because of the books.
It says here that you're a public speaker, fashion designer, and a cook. What do you like to cook?
Hungarian goulash.
Okay, I was going to say that. Tell us what Hungarian goulash is, in case some people don't know.
Well, it's beef, or you can make it with pork. And the basic of Hungarian cooking is usually tomato, capsicum, onion. That's your basic, and paprika.
Okay.
So you cook the meat in that, and it becomes very tasty.
Well, it sounds delicious. I would definitely have some. I think for many Americans, Hungary is one of those places that we know goulash and Zsa Gabor. And,
yes.
And beyond that, we don't know that much about it. I know that in that region, in the Eastern Europe region, there's been a lot of changes over the last 20, 30 years where, for example, Yugoslavia is now 5 different countries, and Czechoslovakia is now Czech and Slovakia, all sort of in the region of Hungary. But Hungary never really changed names, did it? It's always stayed Hungary.
That's right. But the Hungarians are very different from anywhere else. They settled between the 2 rivers, the Danube and the Tisza. That's where they settled. That's basically the Hungary. But the language is nothing like anything else around them. I don't think there's another language similar to it. I think somebody told me that there's another language somewhere else that's similar, but it's a very unusual language.
Okay, so it's not similar to Romanian or Bulgarian or any of the other Czech?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a very different country compared to it. And the ancestors are the kings. Yugoslavia was for a long time, I found out, was sort of, we had the same kings as the Hungarians, but they, again, totally different countries.
Because all of it was part of the Soviet Union until the Soviet Union collapsed, correct?
That's right. But before that, it was really the part of the Hungaro-Austrian Empire.
Right.
And then, of course, with the wars, they kept on losing their land, kept on getting shrinking. And then, of course, after the Second World War, the Russians took over.
Right. And they pretty much took that whole area. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, then all the countries, there was a lot of sort of fighting. The Bosnia, Serbian, that I can remember in the 90s. And then everybody became an independent country again.
Yes. That Hungary, I think Hungary got its independence in a funny way before that, because in 1956 there was the Hungarian Revolution, and then afterwards communism became a bit milder, and then milder, and in the end the Soviets left. I think they still have communism there. I haven't been back because I left in 1956, so I don't know what happened after that very much. I went back once, but my parents were so against communism that we weren't living there for, she was just very much against it. That's all I can say. Hated it.
That was the other question I was going to ask you, was that had you have been back since, you said you've been back once. When did you go back?
Over 30 years ago. It was still under communist rule when I went back. I haven't been back since, but I'm looking at maybe going back in a few years' time.
Let's talk about your book, and let's talk about your mother's story. Now, let's go back to your mother was born. What year was your mother born?
She was born in 1917, I think.
1917. Okay, so just at the end of the First World War.
Just at the end of the First World War, yes.
Okay, and you were born at the end of the Second World War, is that correct?
Yes, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. That's right.
Okay. And so your parents were Jewish, you said, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and then when Hitler started his blitzkrieg through Europe, and of course we know the story of the Holocaust atrocities, your parents had to, well, why don't you tell the story? They had to sort of disguise themselves, is that correct?
Yes, well, they actually separated because the first thing they did, they started gathering up all the men and took them into concentration camps or to slave labor, basically. And so my father had to leave very quickly. And he's got a different story to my mother, but he survived as well, and he was very clever. And then my mother looked at it and she thought, okay, well, this doesn't look very good to me about putting this yellow star on and calling yourself Jewish. And then she could see the beatings and the things that were going on in the street. So she thought, no, I think I'd rather tint my hair blonde and get a false passport. Basically thought outside the square. That's the only way you can say it. And she survived with a false passport, a very, very good false passport.
So she got a black market passport somehow, and then what was the nationality of the passport? Was it still Hungary?
No, it was still Hungarian. It wasn't even a black market. It was very cleverly done. She had a friend who lived in the country, and they had a double identity, basically.
You'll have to explain that. I didn't follow that.
The lady agreed that my mother would use her name.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And because they looked similar. So she just used her name. And it was all signed that it was her.
So during the Nazi occupation, what exactly did your mother do to survive?
Oh, well, as I said, she had the false passport, and she lived under that, and then she got some food. She was just very, very amazing in what she did in survival. It was with her and her brother, who was also very clever, the whole family. First they went off and got the mother, my grandmother, decided to wear the yellow star. And then my uncle went into the ghetto and got her out, wearing a false uniform, and just pointed a gun to her head and said, "Let's get out of here." And nobody stopped them. So he marched her out, and then they hid her in the apartment of the house.
So he was wearing a Nazi uniform?
No. That's again a different story. I found that you see, that was an interesting part, and that's also in my book. he got a false passport long before her because he wanted to get education and Jews weren't allowed to go to university. So he just decided that was that, and he got a false passport and he studied under the under false identification and became an engineer in Hungary. And then, when you start something, you don't know where to stop. And because he had a false identification, he was actually called into the army. He was in the Hungarian army, but then he deserted and came back to look after my mother.
All right. So was she working, or was she doing anything for money?
No, well, they had money, couldn't work during the war, and she was also pregnant with my brother.
Okay.
So it was a pretty tough time from what I understand. You couldn't work and you had to be very careful, although you had the false passport, but you had to be still very careful. So they just lived in a unit and stayed there throughout the war.
So they had enough money to buy food and to pay the bills were they living in an apartment, I assume?
Yes, they had they had enough money to pay the bills. And as I said, she was pregnant. So they didn't go very far away from the apartment because then, although with him also having the false ID, he was still Jewish, and at that time Jewish people were circumcised and non-Jews weren't. So he did have a bit of a problem with that. They would have undressed him, but he was very smart. There was an actual incident once when somebody started questioning his identity, and and he always had a gun in his pocket. He always carried a gun, my uncle. So when somebody started to question him a bit too closely, he just got angry and challenged the guy, and they just backed off. What do you want from me? It was pretty interesting times, from what I understand.
So how did you get all of the information together to write your book?
My mother, she would always talk about it, so I knew from her what was going on. My uncle never talked. We only got 3 sentences from him, so I spent most of my time in the Jewish Museum researching it, because from what I knew, like, how would somebody get, as I just said before, how would somebody have a Hungarian uniform, army uniform? And then I thought, wait a minute, he also told me he was an engineer. Then I found out that Jews weren't allowed to go to university. So he had to have had you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
He had to have had a false passport. Right. So if he had a false passport, he would have been called up to serve in the Hungarian army.
Right.
And that's how he got into it. It's fascinating. I thought his story was very, very interesting. And my father's was as well.
Now, you said your mother and your father separated at some point?
Yes, he was very clever as well. And that's also, I talk about it in my book, because he told me, like, he never talked about it. And then one day, we were traveling from Melbourne to Sydney on an overnight train. And he started talking, and that's when I found out about his story.
Now, how long ago? I assume that they're passed on now, your parents?
Yes, they have, yes.
How long ago was that he started telling you about this?
Oh, that would have been, Jesus, that would have been a very, very long time ago. I'm trying to think now back. About over 40 years ago.
Okay, well, how long had they been gone? When did they pass away?
Well, my father passed away about 15 years ago, and my mother passed about 10 years ago.
Okay, so let's move up to now the war ends and the Germans lose, and then the communists move in basically right after the war, right? The Iron Curtain sort of falls through Berlin and kind of all through Eastern Europe. What was your memory of that? In your bio, it says that you vividly remember the Russian tanks under your bedroom window. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that I definitely remember. It was in October 1956 was the Hungarian Revolution. And October is my birthday. And I was a very spoiled child because the way, I think the book does talk about it, she was very clever. After the World War, she again decided to do something else again, and then she went into the black market in a very big way. So we were living very, very comfortably, and then one day I just heard these shots under the window, and I thought, yippee, they're celebrating my birthday. Looked out the window, and there they were. And I'll never forget those tanks.
So how old were you at this point?
About 10. And I thought, goodness gracious me, I realized it wasn't my birthday.
So what happened at that point?
Well, that was very scary. Right through the revolution, there was one day that I particularly remember, and I do talk about it in my book. We had this absolutely amazing unit that had a bay window. And there was a night when our next door neighbor came over, and we could hear the gunshots, and it was very close, and we were very frightened. And my mother, that's the day that my mother said, that's it. We're leaving this country, and we're not going to stay somewhere where they kill each other every 10 years, and it's cold. Then my uncle said, yes, you're right. We're going to leave, but not right now. So she finally settled down, and this lady was sitting in the window knitting and said, so we wouldn't be frightened now. And then there was a bang. So every time she said now, because she could see the gunfire. In the morning, we realized they weren't shooting from us, they were shooting at us.
Wow.
And every block around us, there was no block. Ours was the only one up with shrapnel in the fence. That was a very sobering thing when you went out next morning and had a look, and there was everything in ruin except our block.
Now, was your father back with you at this point after the war? Did he come back?
Yes, he came back as soon as the war was over, and the Russians were, you see, even after the Nazis, the Russians kicked the Nazis out, still during the war, they still took men to be in slave labor. So he couldn't get back straight away. He hid part of the way. And then as soon as it was okay for him to come out, he came back into the unit to us. But by then my brother was, he would have been about 6 or 7 months old, maybe older.
Do you know where your father was hiding during the war?
Yes, he was, that's another fascinating story that I talk about in my book. He was a mechanic, and would you believe him and a couple of his mates, and I have a picture of it in the book, they decided to make a makeshift sign saying repair unit, hung it up, and had 2 bicycles that they took apart and put together and followed the German army until the Russians beat them, and then they went off and hid. But nobody ever questioned them, would you believe?
So he was running a bicycle repair shop?
No. He just had 2 bikes that they took apart and put together. You never put them together until he got away with one. They never put them together because otherwise it would have been stolen. They were always apart, and they just called it repair shop. It repairs.
I see.
And
okay.
they follow.
All right.
Yep.
So
very clever.
So it looked like a bicycle repair shop.
Hiding in plain sight.
Hiding in plain sight, right. Oh, that's very clever. So, okay, so let's go back to where we were. So the communists, there's the revolution goes on in Hungary. Then how do you get out? How do you decide that you're going to go, and how do you get to Australia in those days?
We were, as I keep saying, she was a brilliant woman, absolutely a genius, because she was in the black market. You know, while most people stood in line for bread, I was eating chocolate. It was that the difference was vast, except you couldn't talk about it. And all I did was spend my time in the library as a child, but I knew what was going on. There was money everywhere. I mean, gold coins in the walls. There was just amazing amount of money. So when the revolution ended and the Russians became in power, she just went to the government and said, I want 12 visas. How much?
And this was 12 visas to go to Australia.
Australia.
Yeah.
Yep. 12 visas. How much? So they said, how much? And she paid it. So we came out legally. as legal immigrants with all our luggage, the paintings, the silverware, the china.
Now, in those days, you had to go by boat. Is that correct?
Yes, we came with an Italian boat leaving from Trieste to Australia.
Do you remember the boat trip?
I'd never forget that boat trip. I also talk about that in my book. It's we went back and forth on the ocean for a little while. We had a death on the boat. We had a Greek, I think the Yugoslav guy bit the Greek man's nose off or the other way around in a fight. We had 500 Greek brides on the board. We had a very interesting trip to Australia.
How long did that boat ride take? I can imagine it must have taken a month at least.
Well, more than a month, because in the middle of it all, we picked up, there was an emergency call for a sick sailor, so we decided to go backwards for a little while and pick him up as well. So I think it took us about 45 days by the time we got here.
So once you got to Australia, what you had to sort of start a new life, start from the beginning again, right?
Yes, very, very hard from the beginning, and you don't speak the language, so it's not that easy.
Right. So what did they do? Now, I assume your mother and father went together.
Yes, well, my father, because he was a mechanic, he got a job straight away. He had no problem in getting a job. And then in the beginning, my mother stayed home with us, but then she couldn't, I don't think she was employable, really, because she was just so, I don't know how you describe it, because she was an artist and she was very clever and she could look at what was needed and create something around whatever was needed. So very shortly she decided that she's going to start having like a contract work for the dresses. So she started up a factory. She was just, she was always, first of all, she was painting. I'll never forget that. She painted these beautiful little dresses. She not screen painted, airbrushed. And then she opened up this, little shop where she actually started making contract work for other people. And that became quite lucrative.
She was painting, you said dresses?
Oh, children's dresses. Originally, she started to do that and wanted to see if she could sell them. But at that time, there wasn't a market for that. But she was very, very artistic. And then she thought, no, this isn't working as well as I thought. I'm not making enough out of this. And then she started doing the contract work for big fashion designers, making their clothes for them and manufacturing.
Are you carrying on that? Because I see in your bio that it says you're a fashion designer. Was this something that you picked up from your mother?
Yes. Yeah, well, I started being interested in clothes a lot earlier than that. I used to have, as a child, paper dolls and dress the paper dolls. And then even back in Hungary, I had a little miniature sewing machine. My mother would buy me, I had a sewing machine. I could weave, miniature toy ones she used to buy for me. So I'm always interested in making clothes for women and to dresses. And then I started doing that. And then, of course, because she had the factory, I went in there and worked with her.
Okay, well, the story is incredible, and I think that it would be well worth to get the book to fill in all the details. The book is called Georgina Holocaust Stories and is available at anywhere, Amazon and
Amazon and Goodreads, and in all you just put in my name, Gabriella Kovac, and it comes up. It's one of the highest rated websites.
Okay, super. Your website is, can you give us the website again?
Yes, it's just if you type in Gabriella Kovac, so it's www.gabriellakovac.com.
Well, Gabriella, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was real interesting to hear the story, and I think that people should get out and buy your book so they could hear the entire story. Best of luck. When is your new book coming out?
I think it will be out next week. It's called Face Courage, and it's a bit different from Georgina, but it's still what I want to do in all my books from now on is give an inspirational story that us, believing ourselves, can achieve anything. And that's basically the basis of it.
Well, after hearing your mother's story, I think it could be a reality for just about anybody who has the determination. Because hopefully nobody has to fight the Nazis and the communists all in the same lifetime anymore.
Yes, but look at all the difficulties that we still have in the world today. If it's maybe not as heavy as the Nazis and the communists, but there's still things around that one needs to stand up and say what they believe in.
Certainly a lot of problems in the world. Perhaps they've just changed. Well, hopefully your book will be an inspiration for people.
Thank you very, very much, Douglas. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Gabriella Kovac, and also thank you to all the people who submitted through music-xray. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the